At last. It's the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Hello everyone and welcome to The Unfiltered. Over here we dig a little bit deeper than the headlines. So if you're like me and you sometimes feel very overwhelmed by the stories that the media tries to feed us, then I'm so happy that you have found your way into my little corner of the world. So today we're going to be talking about the Idaho 4 case again. And specifically, I want to go over how law enforcement found this white Hyundai Elantra that belonged to Bryan Kohberger. Plus, there is a little bit of a wild connection that does seem very unbelievable. So let's get into everything. We already know that Bryan Kohberger has pled guilty to taking the lives of these 4 university students. But there are a lot of questions. I mean, for me, Kohberger didn't have to give any other details other than to say, I did it, which to me seems very odd. As I mentioned before, I've had various discussions with numerous people as to why he would be taking a plea and saying that he's guilty if he isn't. I mean, taking something like that doesn't necessarily mean that you are or you aren't. There could be various reasons why somebody would plead guilty to something that they may not have had anything to do with. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today. I'm not going to say again whether I think Kohberger is innocent or guilty. On the 25th of November 2022, the Moscow police put out a be on the lookout to surrounding law enforcement agencies. And this was for a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra. This also went out to local agencies, including Washington State University. So 4 days later, on the 29th of November, 2 Washington State University campus officers, Curtis Whitman and Officer Daniel Tiengo, well, they decided to look into the database of the Washington State University, and they located a 2015 white Elantra that was registered to Bryan Kohberger. And of course, his vehicle was registered to park on campus. So what they did is they took down the registration plate, and even though it didn't match the description on the be on the lookout, these officers said that they looked at this car because the body style looked almost identical, which does seem reasonable. But what they did is they reported this to the Moscow PD and to the FBI. So as we know, the feds were already involved in this case from the very beginning. But these 2 officers went to Bryan Kohberger's apartment, and this was to visually confirm that it was the vehicle that they were actually looking for. Now, remember that there were over 90 of these white Hyundai Elantras in the database at the University of Idaho. So what is very strange to me is that out of all of these vehicles, these officers somehow got very lucky and they landed on this particular one. Now, 90 cars is not a lot. So you would think that they would go and look through and also do a visual check on all the other cars. But that is not what they did. And they said that that it would be impossible and unnecessary. So it seems to me like they actually had Kohberger in mind before they even had this white Hyundai Elantra in mind. Anyway, that is just my opinion. So 8 days later, on the 7th of December, Moscow Police Department made a public announcement asking for the public's help in locating, wait for it, a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra. And remember, at this time, the public knew nothing about this car. They had never even heard about it or about Kohberger. So, of course, this flooded their tip line. It resulted in over 22,000 reported white Hyundai Elantras. And this is very strange because, remember, before this big public announcement asking for help, the authorities had already identified Bryan Kohberger's car more than a week earlier, on the 29th of November. Even though this car was the wrong make and model. So it kind of seemed like they were making the public think that they were starting this whole investigation from scratch. But we know that that's not true.
Today, progress made in the investigation into the stabbing deaths of 4 University of Idaho students. Moscow police released one of the only pieces of tangible information we've gotten since Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Gonsalves, and Madison Mogen were killed in a house just off campus back on November 13th. Our Abby Davis joins us now with details on what police are looking for. And Abby, as we talked about earlier, this is the first real description we've gotten since these murders occurred.
Well, Morgan, these murders happened more than 3 weeks ago, and we still don't have a suspect named. Now police say that they're looking for a certain car that was in the area around the time of the murders. And Moscow PD says tips and leads led them to look for the people who were in the car because they may have critical information about the crime. After the murders of Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogen, and Kaylee Gonsalves on November 13th, Moscow police want to talk to the people who were in a white 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra seen near 1122 King Road, where the murders happened, around the time of the crime. These are stock images of the car, not the actual car itself. Police say they don't know the license plate number, but received tips leading them to ask for the public's help finding the car and the people who were in it.
After all of this, they run the tags and law enforcement obtains Kohberger's name. So they then run him through the Washington State University database and they realize that Kohberger somehow matches the description that Dylan Mortensen gave to the investigators. So they then run a DMV search, and in this DMV search they realize that Bryan Kohberger had been pulled over, and when he was pulled over he gave the deputy his phone number, and this is very unusual. So let's stop there for a second. At this point, law enforcement, they already had Kohberger's car. They had gone to his apartment to visually confirm the car. They ran the tags, they got his name and his phone number. And for most of us, that would sound like the very moment that you're going to bring in this guy for questioning, right? But that is not what happened. Not at all. Think about it. With all of this in their hands, wouldn't the logical next step be to search his car, maybe even his apartment, especially with DNA evidence that could be sitting right there, just waiting to be found? But they didn't do it. And it's very suspicious to me. I mean, if you've got a suspect who basically fits the profile of your own, be on the lookout, and this person is wanted for questioning, then the longer you leave them out there, the more opportunity they have to go and clean that car, scrub down the apartment, wipe away fingerprints, and basically destroy anything that could tie them to this crime. Not to mention that they could just pack up and run. But you see, that is not what Bryan Kohberger did. I mean, he didn't flee at all. He stayed in the area, he was driving around, and he went about his life as though nothing was wrong. So the real question is, would somebody who was supposedly so paranoid, so aware that police were on the hunt for a car just like his, really be out there acting that normal? I don't think that adds up at all. On the 16th of December, Bryan Kohberger took his car in to have it serviced. Now, why on earth would he risk something like that? I mean, he had to have known that this vehicle was already being looked at in connection with this crime. So you mean to tell me that a man who is supposedly so paranoid and socially anxious and hyper aware of being followed just casually drove his car into a shop and handed it over for someone else to work on? Now, that just doesn't line up. I mean, if he was as paranoid as they claim, he would have been absolutely terrified of anyone touching that car, let alone a mechanic tearing into it. And what is even stranger is that when law enforcement finally seized the Elantra on the 30th of December, they found nothing in it. No blood, no hair, no trace of the victims. The FBI swabbed it, they tested the car, and nothing ties to those victims. Now, if you think about this, if Kohberger committed this crime, and I'm not saying he didn't, even if he was suited up in layers of clothing, something would have got on him. Hair, trace evidence, anything. And if he got it on himself, there's a very good chance that some of it would have ended up in the vehicle. But somehow nothing did. Not even a single drop, not a single hair. So the question is, how can a car that was supposedly used to flee one of the most brutal crime scenes in recent history come back that clean? So on the 17th of December, there was another white Hyundai Elantra that showed up. And this car was abandoned and wrecked in Eugene, Oregon. A call came into the Moscow PD that there was a homeless person that was sleeping inside of the vehicle. And when police traced it, they found that it belonged to a woman from Colorado. And officially, they said that this had absolutely nothing to do with this case at all. But people have come out saying that this woman bought the car from a man named Dan Esty. And apparently, he was one of the owners of 1122 King Road. Now, this connection has never really been verified, but the thing is, we're told that this Elantra had nothing to do with the case, yet when you line it up with the whole timeline, it's just a little bit too close for comfort. Another abandoned car, and then on the 19th of December, Moscow police were still asking the public for tips on any white Elantras from 2011 to 2013. So why wouldn't this one that was wrecked and sitting right there be treated as seriously as the others? I mean, were authorities too quick to dismiss all these leads because they basically already had their eyes locked in on Bryan Kohberger? Or was this car legitimately nothing more than a wrecked vehicle? But it just popped up at the worst possible time. I don't know. If you do know anything about this car, you're welcome to put it in the comments. So this white Hyundai Elantra is actually central to the entire investigation. And I think by now, most of us have seen all the security footage that was released of the whole area. The thing is, the footage only shows this Elantra passing by the residence. Well, yes, several times. But there's nothing showing that this car actually parked in front of 1122 King Road. There's nothing tying this car to the property or proving that the car stopped for any reason at all. So basically, right from the start, there's this huge question mark. Was this car actually involved in the crime at all? I mean, was it just driving through the neighborhood, basically like any other car? It could have been a student, a DoorDash driver, or pretty much anyone on the street. Now, there are reports that Moscow PD officers were driving light-colored four-door sedans while they were working undercover. So that means that this car could have been a cop on a routine patrol, completely unrelated to what happened in that house. And to this day, nobody has actually put Bryan Kohberger behind the wheel of that car. There's absolutely no image of him parking it, getting out, walking into the home, and leaving. And I know that it said that he was parked at the back of the residence. Okay, but there were cameras all over. From what I understand, there should be camera footage of the car parked, and we're just not seeing that. I find it very strange and very difficult to believe that the feds cannot, I mean, they can do so many things, but they cannot produce an image of Kohberger behind the wheel of that white Hyundai Elantra, and that just seems very strange to me. I'd like to know your thoughts on that, and if you have any suggestions, comments, please feel free to leave them, and don't forget to like and subscribe on your way out. Go do something nice for yourself, and I will catch you next time.